I saw Mrs. Kyrus plead with Barry to stop shooting. Barry, without hesitation, shot her. He showed no grace and no mercy.
We're in Washington at the Spokane Court of Appeals, where we bring you a chilling tale that shook a small town to its core. On that fateful day of February 2nd, 1996, Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington became the backdrop for a horrifying school shooting. Dressed as a Wild West-style gunslinger, 14-year-old Barry Lukaitis unleashed a wave of violence, taking the lives of his algebra teacher and 2 fellow students. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, 1 count of first-degree attempted murder, and 16 counts of aggravated kidnapping. In the quiet town of Moses Lake, Washington, the Lukaitis family was grappling with a series of issues that would ultimately culminate in a devastating act of violence. It was a year of turmoil and dysfunction, with tension simmering beneath the surface. Barry Dale Lukaitis, a troubled 14-year-old boy, found himself caught in the midst of this storm. The cracks in the Lukaitis family began to show in 1995 when Barry's parents, Joanne Phillips and Chuck Lukaitis, separated. The reason behind their separation was a painful one. Joanne had discovered her husband's affair. The revelation shattered the family's foundation, leaving them in a state of disarray. As the new year dawned in 1996, Joanne took a dark turn. She became increasingly distant, withdrawing from her son Barry and speaking of suicide. The weight of her despair was overwhelming, and she began to imply that Barry would have to join her in death. Shockingly, she set Valentine's Day of 1996 as the date for their double suicide. Barry, desperate to prevent this tragedy, devised a plan to save his mother. He convinced her to write down her feelings, hoping it would relieve her. It was a temporary respite from the darkness that loomed over their lives, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. Meanwhile, Barry's mental health was deteriorating. Psychologists hired by the defense would later suggest that he may have been suffering from depression or bipolar disorder. However, prosecution witness Dr. Alan Eunice, a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the University of Washington, diagnosed him with dysthymic disorder. Eunice argued that Lukaitis couldn't have bipolar disorder because his personality hadn't fully developed at the time of the shooting. Lukaitis drew inspiration from the Stephen King novel Rage, a story that revolved around a student who kills 2 teachers and takes his algebra class hostage. The protagonist, Charlie Decker, became a twisted role model for Lukaitis, fueling his delusions of power and superiority. As the pieces of this dark puzzle fell into place, Lukaitis began to plan his own act of violence. He meticulously crafted a plan that would forever change the lives of those in his community. Dressed as a Wild West-style gunslinger, complete with a black duster, he armed himself with a .30 .30 caliber hunting rifle and 2 handguns that belonged to his father. On that fateful day, February 2nd, 1996, Lukaitis embarked on a path of destruction. He walked from his house to Frontier Middle School, where he entered his algebra classroom during the 5th period. Unleashing his pent-up rage, he opened fire on his unsuspecting classmates, forever shattering the peace and innocence of their school. The room erupted in chaos as 2 students, Arnold Fritz and Manuel Vela Jr., both 14 years old, tragically lost their lives. Another student, 13-year-old Natalie Hintz, sustained critical gunshot wounds to her right arm and abdomen. The scene was one of unimaginable horror, as the lives of innocent children were forever altered. But Lukaitis didn't stop there. In a shocking act of violence, he turned his attention to his algebra teacher, Leona Karas. With a single shot to the chest, he ended her life, forever robbing the school of a dedicated educator. The classroom became a battleground, with Lukaitis holding his classmates hostage. He planned to use one of them as a shield, ensuring his safe exit from the school. It was in this moment of terror that gym coach John Lane, upon hearing the gunshots, entered the room and confronted Lukaitis. Lane, displaying incredible bravery, volunteered to be the hostage. Lukaitis kept him at gunpoint with his rifle, unaware of the courage and determination that burned within Lane. In a daring move, Lane seized the opportunity to disarm Lukaitis, wresting the weapon away from him. With Lukaitis subdued, Lane then assisted in the evacuation of students, ensuring their safety until the arrival of law enforcement. The events leading up to the shooting were a harrowing journey through the darkness that consumed Barry Lukaitis. The disintegration of his family, his struggles with mental health, and his fascination with violence all converged to create a perfect storm. The consequences of his actions would reverberate through the lives of the survivors and the community of Moses Lake, leaving scars that that would never fully heal. The aftermath of the Frontier Middle School shooting sent shockwaves through the community of Moses Lake, Washington. As the town grappled with the devastating loss of innocent lives, the legal system began to piece together the events that led to that tragic day. The trial of Barry Lukatis would become a pivotal moment in seeking justice and understanding the motivations behind his heinous actions. Should 15-year-old Barry Lukatis be tried as an adult or as a juvenile? The weight of this decision hung in the balance, as it would determine the severity of the consequences he would face for his crimes. On July 2nd, 3 members of the Spokane Court of Appeals successfully convinced Judge Evan Sperline to allow court-appointed psychiatrist Joan Petrick to present testimony regarding Lukatis' mental health. The trial, originally scheduled to take place in Moses Lake, was later moved to Seattle, Washington due to the intense media scrutiny and public interest surrounding the case. Lukatis pleaded insanity on all charges against him, claiming that his violent actions were a result of mood swings. The courtroom became the stage for a battle between the defense and the prosecution, each presenting their arguments and evidence to support their respective positions.
I saw Mrs. Kyra's plea with Barry to stop shooting. Barry, without hesitation, shot her. He showed no grace and no mercy.
During the trial, Joan Petrick, the court-appointed psychiatrist, took the stand and provided crucial insights into Lukatis' mental state leading up to the shooting. She testified that Lukatis had been experiencing delusional and messianic thoughts, believing himself to be superior to others and even feeling like he was a god. These distorted perceptions of reality painted a disturbing picture of a troubled young man who had become detached from the world around him. Prosecutors Donna Wise and John Nodell argued that Lukatis had carefully planned the shooting, drawing inspiration from various sources. They pointed to the Pearl Jam song Jeremy as a catalyst for his violent actions, despite the song's true message being misunderstood due to media restrictions on its imagery.
She loved to teach. She died with a piece of chalk in one hand and an eraser in the other.
Lukatis himself claimed that he was only intent on killing Manuel Vela, one of his classmates, and that the other deaths were accidental. However, the prosecution argued that his actions were premeditated and calculated. They painted a picture of a young man who had meticulously planned the shooting, drawing inspiration from various sources of violence and rebellion. On September 24, 1997, the jury delivered its verdict. Lukatis was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, 1 count of first-degree attempted murder, and 16 counts of aggravated kidnapping. The weight of his crimes was undeniable, and the court handed down a sentence that reflected the severity of his actions. With little remorse on his face, he plainly agreed with the sentencing he was about to receive.
Justice for the people affected by this is to have me stay in prison.
Lukatis was sentenced to serve 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 205 years. The court's decision aimed to ensure that he would never again pose a threat to society. He was sent to the Clallam Bay Correction Center in Washington State, where he remains incarcerated to this day. The Washington State Court of Appeals denied Lukatis' request for a new trial in 1999, solidifying the finality of his conviction. The legal proceedings had come to an end, but the impact of the shooting continued to reverberate through the lives of the survivors, the families of the victims, and the community as a whole. Years later, in 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that individuals convicted of murder committed when they were under 18 years old could not receive automatic life terms without parole. This ruling was later applied retroactively, leading to a re-evaluation of Lukatis' sentence. In 2017, Lukatis appeared before the Grant County Superior Court for a resentencing hearing. During this hearing, Lukatis offered an apology for the first time. In a letter to the court, he expressed remorse for his actions and the pain he had caused. However, the court upheld the majority of his original sentence, resentencing him to 189 years in prison. The resentencing served as a reminder that the consequences of his actions would never be erased, and that the scars left by the shooting would forever remain. We're in Florida for the sentencing of 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz. On February 14, 2018, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, became the site of a horrifying tragedy that would forever change the lives of those involved. 19-year-old Cruz, a former student at the school, unleashed a wave of violence that claimed the lives of 17 innocent people and left 17 others injured. He was subsequently charged with 17 counts of premeditated first-degree murder and 17 counts of attempted first-degree murder. In order to understand understand the crimes committed by Nicholas Cruz, it is crucial to examine the timeline of events leading up to the tragic shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. It all began on February 14, 2018, a day that started like any other for the students and staff at the school. Little did they know that their lives were about to be forever changed. In the afternoon, at approximately 2:21 p.m., Cruz, armed with an AR-15 rifle and multiple magazines of ammunition, entered the school premises. Chaos erupted as Cruz made his way through the hallways, targeting students and staff indiscriminately. The sound of gunshots echoed through the corridors, shattering the tranquility of the school. As the terrifying ordeal unfolded, students and teachers desperately sought shelter, barricading themselves in classrooms and closets, doing whatever they could to protect themselves from the hail of bullets. Meanwhile, the school resource officer, Scott Peterson, who was armed and on duty at the time, failed to take any action to confront the shooter. For approximately 6 minutes, Cruz continued his rampage, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. It wasn't until 2:28 p.m. that law enforcement received the first 911 call reporting an active shooter on the premises. The response from law enforcement was swift, as officers from various agencies rushed to the scene, determined to neutralize the threat and save lives. Finally, at 3:41 p.m., approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes after the shooting began, Cruz was apprehended in a nearby neighborhood without incident. The nightmare was over, but the scars left behind would last a lifetime. To truly understand the crimes committed by Nicholas Cruz, it is important to delve into his background and motivations. Cruz was no stranger to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School community, having been a former student himself. Born on September 24, 1998, Cruz had a troubled upbringing. He faced numerous behavioral issues and had a history of disciplinary problems both within and outside of school. Reports suggest that Cruz had a fascination with firearms and violence, often posting disturbing content on social media platforms. These warning signs, however, were not acted upon with the necessary urgency. As the investigation into Cruz's background unfolded, it became clear that he had been receiving mental health treatment in the past. However, the extent and effectiveness of this treatment remain subjects of debate. It is believed that a combination of factors, including a troubled upbringing, mental health issues, and a fascination with violence, contributed to Cruz's motivations for carrying out the horrific act of violence on that fateful day.
Last week, I sat with you, Attorney Sachs, in his office. Watched the video of you. I'm glad I get to see your face right now. Of you killing my daughter for the very first time.
The exact motivations behind Cruz's actions may never be fully understood. However, it is clear that he harbored a deep-seated anger and resentment that ultimately manifested in a violent and tragic manner. After the arrest of Nicholas Cruz, the legal proceedings began, shedding light on the extent of his crimes and the shocking lack of remorse he displayed throughout the courtroom proceedings. Cruz faced a multitude of charges, including multiple counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming, with witnesses, surveillance footage, and the recovery of the weapon used in the shooting. During the trial, Cruz pleaded guilty to all charges, accepting responsibility for the lives he had taken and the pain he had caused. However, his lack of remorse was evident from the start. Witnesses described Cruz as emotionless and detached, showing no signs of remorse for his heinous actions. This lack of empathy only further deepened the grief and anger felt by the victims' families and the community at large.
There are, actually by a show of hands, anyone else in this room, because of him, going to have to endure not watching people they love get married?
As the trial progressed, the prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting the premeditation and calculated nature of Cruz's crimes. The defense, on the other hand, focused on Cruz's troubled background and mental health issues. In the end, the jury delivered their verdict, finding Cruz guilty on all counts. The judge, in delivering the sentence, emphasized the gravity of his crimes and the irreparable harm he had inflicted upon so many lives. Cruz was sentenced to life without parole, ensuring that he would never walk free again. However, this punishment could never undo the pain and suffering experienced by the victims and their loved ones. Wounded teacher Stacy Lipple had this emotional statement to make during the sentencing of Nicholas Cruz.
The only comfort I have is that your life in prison will be filled with horror and fear. So my hope for you is that you die sooner rather than later. I have no forgiveness in my heart for you. You are a monster with no remorse, and every breath you take is a breath wasted.
The lack of remorse displayed by Cruz throughout the legal proceedings only added to the anguish felt by those affected. It served as a chilling reminder of the cold-heartedness and callousness that led to this tragic event. In the aftermath of the trial, the community continued to grapple with the devastating impact of the shooting. The scars left behind would forever serve as a reminder of the need for change and the importance of preventing such tragedies from happening again. On November 2nd, 2022, Cruz was officially sentenced to 34 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, one each for the total number of victims murdered and wounded by Cruz. We're in Castle Rock, Colorado at the Douglas County Courthouse for the arraignment of Devin Erickson, a teenager responsible for a Denver high school shooting that killed one teenager and injured 8 others. He was convicted on 46 counts, including first-degree murder among others. It was a day that would forever be etched in the memory of the quiet suburban community of Highlands Ranch, Colorado. On May 7, 2019, the halls of STEM school Highlands Ranch were transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. The lives of students and faculty were shattered as the sound of gunshots echoed through the once peaceful corridors. The shooting resulted in the death of 1 student and the injury of 8 others, leaving the community in a state of shock and disbelief. The perpetrators behind this heinous act were 18-year-old Devin Erickson and his partner Alex McKinney. Their names would soon become synonymous with tragedy and loss. STEM, School Highlands Ranch, with its approximately 1,850 students, was a place of learning and growth. However, beneath the surface of academic achievement, there were whispers of a darker reality. Concerns about bullying and violence had been raised by an anonymous parent, shining a light on the underlying tensions within the school. The school administration, instead of addressing these concerns head-on, chose a different path. They filed a defamation lawsuit against the parent who dared to speak out, further exacerbating the already strained relationship between the school and the community. As the tension mounted, an edit was made to the Wikipedia page for STEM School Highlands Ranch in April 2019. The edit mentioned the implementation of anti-suicide programs at the school, raising questions about the mental health of the students and the need for additional support systems. A comment accompanying the edit suggested a possible warning, hinting at the troubled waters that lay ahead. These concerns, however, were not given the attention they deserved, and the tragic events that unfolded on that fateful day would serve as a chilling reminder of the consequences of neglecting the signs. On the morning of May 7, 2019, Erickson and his partner in crime arrived at STEM School Highlands Ranch, armed with handguns and other weapons concealed within guitar cases. They had meticulously planned their attack, their minds consumed by a darkness that few could comprehend. As the school day progressed, chaos erupted within the walls of the institution. Erickson and McKinney opened fire in 2 separate locations, unleashing a wave of terror that would forever scar the lives of those present. Students, once focused on their studies, now found themselves running for their lives. The deafening sound of gunshots reverberated through the hallways, shattering the tranquility that once defined the school. In the midst of the chaos, a young man named Kendrick Castillo emerged as a hero. With unwavering courage, he lunged at one of the shooters, attempting to subdue him and protect his fellow students. Tragically, Kendrick was fatally shot in the chest, his selfless act of bravery forever etched in the annals of heroism. Despite the loss of their comrade, 2 other students managed to overpower and disarm one of the shooters, preventing further bloodshed. Their bravery in the face of unimaginable danger served as a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. As the chaos subsided, the suspects were taken into custody without being fired upon by officers. It was during the subsequent investigation that the true extent of the tragedy began to unfold. McKinney later revealed that he had planned to take his own life after the shooting, but was unable to release the safety mechanism on his handgun. The chilling revelation shed light on the depths of despair that had consumed the minds of these young individuals. The shooting at STEM School Highlands Ranch had left 1 student dead and 8 others injured, their lives forever altered by the traumatic events they had endured. The community was left grappling with grief, searching for answers in the aftermath of such senseless violence. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the nation, prompting responses from President Donald Trump and various politicians. Calls for stricter gun control laws reverberated across the country as the devastating consequences of unchecked violence became impossible to ignore. Vigils, rallies, and memorials were held in the community as residents came together to mourn the loss of a bright young life and support those affected by the tragedy. The healing process had only just begun, done, but the resilience of the community would prove to be a beacon of hope in the face of darkness. The aftermath of the STEM School Highlands Ranch shooting was marked by a sense of urgency to bring the perpetrators to justice. The legal proceedings that followed would shed light on the true nature of Devin Erickson and the extent of his involvement in the tragic events that unfolded on that fateful day. As the trial of Devin Erickson began in May 2021, the courtroom was filled with tension and anticipation. The families of the victims, still grappling with their grief, anxiously awaited the opportunity to see justice served. The evidence presented during the trial was overwhelming, painting a vivid picture of the events that transpired at STEM School Highlands Ranch. Erickson was charged with multiple criminal counts, including first-degree murder, a testament to the severity of his actions. Throughout the trial, it became evident that Erickson showed no remorse for the pain and suffering he had caused. His demeanor in the courtroom was cold and detached, a stark contrast to the anguish felt by the families of the victims. Witnesses took the stand, recounting the harrowing moments of the shooting and the devastating impact it had on their lives. Their testimony served as a powerful reminder of the lives forever altered by Erickson's actions. The prosecution meticulously built their case, presenting a mountain of evidence against Erickson. The jury listened intently as the shocking details of the crimes were laid bare, leaving an indelible mark on their collective consciousness. The defense, in an attempt to humanize Erickson, delved into his troubled past and the challenges he faced. However, their efforts fell short in the face of overwhelming evidence and the lack of remorse displayed by the defendant.
And you may not return to the STEM school located at 8773 South Ridgeline Boulevard. You also may have no contact with the co-participant.
As the trial drew to a close, the weight of the crimes committed by Erickson hung heavily in the air. The judge, recognizing the gravity of the situation, prepared to deliver a sentence that would reflect the magnitude of his actions. Finally, the moment arrived. Erickson was convicted on 46 counts, including first-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge pronounced the sentence that would seal Erickson's fate. Erickson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a punishment that would ensure he would never walk free again. But the judge didn't stop there. In a symbolic gesture, Erickson was also sentenced to an additional 1,282 years, a stark reminder of the countless lives forever altered by his actions. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions. The families of the victims, though relieved by the verdict, knew that their lives would never be the same. The wounds inflicted by Erickson's senseless violence would forever leave a scar on their hearts. As Erickson was led away, his lack of remorse remained a haunting presence in the minds of those who had witnessed the trial. The families of the victims, still grappling with their grief, were left to wonder how someone could commit such heinous acts without a shred of empathy. The shooting at STEM School Highlands Ranch prompted responses from President Donald Trump and various politicians, reigniting the debate on gun control laws. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the urgent need for stricter regulations to prevent such senseless acts of violence. In the aftermath of the shooting, the community came together to heal and support one another. Vigils, rallies, and memorials were held to honor the victims and provide solace to those affected by the tragedy. The scars left by the STEM School Highlands Ranch shooting would never fully heal, but the community's resilience and determination to create a safer future would serve as a beacon of hope. The legacy of those lost would inspire future generations to strive for a world free from the horrors of senseless violence. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome courtroom videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.